So, Lee and Darla, you are the director and producer of the Golden Globe award-winning film Coco. First off, congratulations on that. Take us back to the beginning. Oh, you're welcome. Take us back to the very beginning. Where did the idea for this movie come from?
Well, Darla and I worked on Toy Story 3 together, and after we finished with that and I started thinking about what was next, I kicked around a few different ideas. Was the idea of telling a story set against the Mexican tradition of Dia de Muertos. I had always been interested in it, and I wanted to learn more beyond the kind of my limited knowledge. And so I started reading a lot of books. We started bringing in some cultural advisors and experts, and the more that I learned, the more that I saw the potential for telling a story that could not only be really kind of fun, a fun adventure, very cool visually, but also a story that could have a lot of emotion and have some themes that could be universal, so that audiences all over the world could potentially enjoy the film, even though it was so specifically Mexican.
And then at what point did you arrive at the story of this being about a young boy and his love of music and his conflict with his family, and then reuniting with his deceased elders in the underworld? I mean, how many drafts and trials and error did you go to arrive at that?
We worked on a bunch of different ideas for the first part of the process, months on an idea that was very different than what we ended up with. And that idea, I ultimately realized that thematically it was kind of at odds with what the tradition of Dia de Muertos is all about. We were telling a story that was about kind of letting go and moving on in life after somebody had passed away. And that's just not what Dia de Muertos is all about. It's all about never forgetting. It's about the obligation that we have to pass on the stories of our loved ones and to always remember them. And so we scrapped that first idea and then came up with this idea of a little boy living in a family that didn't allow music, but he secretly really wanted to be a musician. And everything kind of started to unfold from there once we had that kind of basic concept.
And then 5 short years later.
I was going to ask Darla, as the producer of this movie, can you talk a bit about how you helped facilitate the vision of somebody like Lee and the writers and all of these great artists who work on this movie?
Well, I mean, I just love working with Lee. I mean, honestly, I'd follow him anywhere with almost anything he did. He's just a brilliant director.
She would follow me into the men's room.
At any rate, so this was really, really a fun challenge. This is my fifth film producing at Pixar, and each film is its own unique set of challenges. And in this case, we had. If you've seen Coco, it's a huge, beautiful film with all kinds of gorgeous sets. And then we have lots and lots of characters. And then the idea of bringing in an all-Latino cast and all of that. So I worked happily trying to do the impossible with this gorgeous film that I was very proud of and excited for the world to see.
Talk a bit about creating the world of the underworld. World of the underworld. It's such a vibrant and colorful imagining of what this would look like. Can you talk a bit about how you designed that?
Sure. Well, very early on, we knew we were going to travel to the land of the dead in our film, and I wanted to make sure that what we were doing was unique. So, of every film that we could think of that had any kind of depiction of heaven or an afterlife or an underworld. And we watched all of them just so we could be aware of what had been done, trying to do something that was new and unique. And we found that mostly in celebrating the colors and the rich architecture of Mexico. I mean, we could have made up anything, I suppose, but I wanted it to be rooted in, in Mexican culture. So we found influences in lots of different places. And we made this decision to have the land of the dead growing up out of water. And we made that decision based upon the history of Mexico City. Mexico City in antiquity was, had a series of canals, and there was kind of water everywhere. No longer the case, but we wanted to kind of pay homage to that history. I was also really affected by one city that we visited in Mexico during our research trips, the city called Guanajuato, which is a very colorful city of buildings, colorful buildings that are kind of encrusted into this scooped out valley. And it's very striking looking, and that ended up really influencing kind of what we ended up doing in the Land of the Dead. Ultimately, to be kind of a logic to the Land of the Dead. And I figured people are constantly showing up in the Land of the Dead, and it's not going to be getting smaller, it's only going to be getting bigger over time. And so we imagined a world that was constantly being added onto with no building codes, and that there would be a reflection of kind of like layers of history in these big towers that we imagined, that would start with ancient Mesoamerican Aztec pyramids and then become kind of more modern over time as we get up toward the top where all the cranes are.
If you will, talk a bit about some of the nuts and bolts that go into creating an animated film. It's such an arduous, long process. So can you talk a bit about ironing out some of the story issues and storyboarding and things like that, basically preparing to make a movie like this?
Well, as we talked about, it's a long process. We probably spent 3.5 years just working on the story on Coco. So there's a lot that goes on. We go down a lot of blind alleys. That's what the whole storyboarding part of the process is all about. It's kind of an extension of the screenwriting process. I think we knew pretty early on what the basic structure of the movie was going to be, and we had our ending. We knew that Miguel was going to sing to Mama Coco at the end. We had some things in place, and it became mostly about, how to tell the story in the most interesting way. Sometimes characters are a little underdeveloped, and it takes time to find them. That was kind of the case with Mama Imelda, Miguel's great-great-grandmother. She originally was just a shadow of the character that she ultimately became.
And we really, really wanted to have a strong matriarch in the film and have that reflect a lot of what we saw when we were visiting Mexico and what happens a lot in Latino families, and just have her have the strong, beautiful voice. And she was the anchor of the entire family, so that was clearly important for our storytelling.
Mm-hmm. We also have a lot of twists and turns in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
If you've seen it, there are a lot of secrets and things that kind of are revealed slowly, and that was a real game of figuring out the best way to do those reveals and when to do them and who knows what. I learned a lot about kind of like mystery writing, I suppose, working on this.
Yeah.
There were just other tricky logistical things, like, Miguel and Hector need to really get bonded quite a bit in the course of the movie. But if you look at the actual amount of screen time that we have between the two of them, it's pretty limited, because Miguel doesn't even meet him until well into the film. And then they get kind of split apart not too long after that. And there's another big stretch of time before Hector shows up again. So to work our way toward an ending where the audience would buy Miguel being kind of really emotionally invested with Hector, took a lot of work, honestly, to kind of figure out just the right scenes to have in just the right order for the ending to then have an emotional impact.
You two have worked at Pixar for decades, I think since practically the very beginning. Can you talk a bit about working there and how how it's developed over the years? I mean, the storytelling practices, the teamwork, and all that stuff. How has it developed over these years?
It's interesting because so many of us are still there, and so the way we started back then was, I think, in so many ways, an intuitive process. There's a lot of so much collaboration where we all work together, and that's still that same spirit, that same thread is still alive today. Where about 3 to 4 months, every 3 to 4 months, we put our film up and show it to each other and invite other people from the studio, big audiences, and then we go into a room and hash it out, and it's a very I don't know. I just absolutely love it. It's terrifying to consistently be putting your film up every 4 months, but at the same time, it's wonderful to know that everybody at the studio just wants this film to be the best and is helping you in the best way they can to help you tell your story.
The other thing that's been interesting over time is that I find that a lot of people assume that we know what we're doing because we've made a lot of good films that have been very successful and have won awards. But the reality is that we, I guess in some regards, there's an ease because we've been through it a lot. But when you get down to the nitty gritty of telling a good story and constructing a good film, it really never becomes any easier. Each story has its own unique challenges, and we struggle just as much, if not more so, with Coco than some of our earliest films.
Speaking of winning awards, you two have been through the Oscar race before with Toy Story 3, which of course won the Oscar for Best Animated Film, and is also one of only 3 animated films to ever be nominated for Best Picture, along with Beauty and the Beast and Up, another Pixar movie. If you could talk a bit about what that recognition meant for you, not just in terms of winning the Oscar, but also of being one of only 3 producers to contend for an animated film, being a part of that elite group.
Yeah. Well, it was thrilling, of course, and we were deeply honored to have gotten that Best Picture nomination for Toy Story 3. What it did for me is it validated what I've long believed, is that we're making films that are worthy of being recognized alongside any live action films, and that's really been a struggle to find that parity. And we still struggle with it, even though we've got those nominations. I often feel like we're sitting at the kids' table, to be honest with you. And it's unfortunate because I know the work that goes into our films. I know that, we are not just making movies for children. We're making movies for everybody. And we have a lot of really amazing filmmakers at the studio, and I would put their work alongside any other work being done in the industry. So we have had these moments where we've gotten recognition outside the category, and that's been very nice. I'd like to see that happen more, if the film is worthy, of course. But I just, I feel like the work that we're doing deserves to be kind of judged alongside all other films.
Yeah, I mean, and it was such a thrilling time to see, as Lee mentioned, to see our film up there alongside all the other. There was amazing films that year, and I don't know, I just felt very proud. And as always, as Lee mentioned earlier, we do this with such an extraordinarily large team over the course of all these years, both internally and externally, and so. When you see the recognition, it's kind of like, you want to do it for your parents. And in our case, we want to do it for our family and our parents, but most importantly, all those people who put so much work into the movie. And so that recognition just means the world to us and the team.
As you mentioned, I mean, certainly Pixar has gone a long way in helping to show that these movies are not just for children. They're for people of all ages, and this is another one of them. Thank you both so much. Congratulations on the movie.
Thank you. It's great talking to you.
Thank you so much.
Great talking to you as well. Have a good day.
Bye.